many interactive systems that people use on a daily basis. And several researchers have found challenges which users encounter when they use these systems, like, for example, algorithmic unawareness or algorithmic anxiety. To mention only one specific example here from Bucher, you might have experienced a similar situation. You were scrolling through your news feed on Facebook in the morning, drinking a cup of coffee, and suddenly you see an ad for exactly this coffee brand. You feel kind of creepy, you feel kind of profiled or found by the algorithm. However, a large-scale empirical assessment of current everyday problems with intelligent everyday systems is still missing. Hence, our first research question is, which problems do users encounter when using intelligent everyday applications? But of course, as researchers, we also want to know the solutions. How can we support users when they encounter these problems? So our second research question is, what kind of support do users want for which problem? And in the first part of the talk, we will address this first research question. However, how do we ask users about their problems with intelligent systems? We have done this in the beginning, asking some friends, and first of all, you get this kind of response, what is an algorithm? Or you get some kind of, oh, I have these bugs with the application. So simply asking users about their experience with intelligent systems most likely does not yield any fruitful answers. To overcome this obstacle, Bucher examined people's personal stories about their experience with the Facebook newsfeed algorithm through tweets and interviews. We followed a similar approach, but chose to analyze the reviews instead to increase the sample size. We found reviews suitable because, according to previous research, reviews reflect users' attitude towards an application and document the experience that they make with this application. So in the first step, we scraped several thousands of these reviews from the Google Play Store. Afterwards, we clustered these reviews using topic modeling. And finally, we manually analyzed the resulting topics to infer users' problems. And now we will tell you a little bit more details about the data analysis method. We focus on three very popular everyday applications, namely Google Maps, Facebook, and Netflix. In the first step, we built a web crawler to scrape the latest 10,000 reviews for Facebook and Netflix, respectively, as well as about 15,500 reviews for Google Maps. In line with previous findings, we found when we had a first inspection of these reviews that several of them look like this. So you have like a short praise or just a repetition of the star rating. Since we are looking at problems with intelligent user interfaces, these kind of reviews are rather uninformative for us. So we excluded all reviews with a higher rating than 3 stars. But we still had these kind of reviews, which still don't really help us. So to obtain a more nuanced impression of users' attitudes towards the applications, we conducted a sentiment analysis of the remaining reviews. Therefore, we used the Google Cloud Natural Language API to assign each review a score and a magnitude for sentiment. And then we selected only those reviews with a clear negative emotional content. And as a consequence, our dataset was decreased by about 70%, respectively. For the remaining 7,500 reviews, we applied topic modeling to break the data down into different topics. And topic modeling yielded 34 topics for Google Maps and Netflix, respectively, as well as 22 topics for Facebook. Afterwards, we manually extracted and labeled those topics based on the top 10 keywords, as well as the top 10 most representative reviews associated with each topic as discovered by the model. And therefore, by labeling these topics, we describe the core problem underlying each of the topics. Then we had all these topics, but we ignored those topics which related to the aforementioned bugs and usability problems. And this resulted in 13 problems for Google Maps, 3 for Facebook, and 11 for Netflix. And these topics covered then between 12.5 and 35.5% of all reviews. So what are the problems that users reported in their reviews? We aggregated our results into problem categories along 4 steps of a basic pipeline of algorithmic decision making. First of all, the knowledge base is like the database for the algorithm, for example, the map data on Google Maps. Then, of course, we have the algorithm itself, for example, like a creation algorithm on Facebook. User choice describes the user's option to influence the algorithm or the algorithmic output. So, for example, you get several routes from Google Maps, and then you can select one of them. And finally, user feedback describes the possibilities for the user to give feedback to the system about the computed result. Was the accuracy fine or not? So you can find an overview of all of these problems that we found here, but we only to highlight 5 of them now. First of all, concerning the knowledge base, the reviews indicated problems with the location sensors, particularly off-road. So for example, this user complained, take it off-road and it's useless. If I'm not on a road, my location appears to shift 1 kilometer or more in seconds. I even appear to walk on water, crossing lakes and rivers without any effort. Regarding the algorithm, users reported problems with the content, composition and ranking of the Facebook feed. For example, this user reported, you know what I miss? Seeing actual posts from friends. Not ads, not what my friends liked or commented on, what they post and share, not spam, with posts from pages I follow, things actual friends post. So you can see they are getting kind of emotional in these reviews. And regarding user choice, users kind of claimed that they want to have more information and misinformation on Netflix. So for example, this user said, they just removed the synopsis for all their shows. What gives Netflix? I need more than a still photo and search keywords to decide if I want to watch something. And another example for user choice is here that Google Maps seems to override the user's selected routes. So for example, this user stated, I choose a route because I want to take the scenic route. Then without telling me, it just puts me back on the quickest route, which drives me insane. Not everyone is trying to get to places fast. Some of us like to see the world while doing it. And this also kind of relates to the comment that we heard this morning after the keynote, that sometimes the user thinks he or she knows which route to select, but the system overrides them. And finally, regarding user feedback, users noted that they prefer more nuanced options to give feedback about the algorithmic output. So for example, this user wrote, the rating system is still horrible. Every movie I look at says 98% match. Like, how am I supposed to know if I should actually watch the movie if every movie is a match? Bring back the 5-star system. And now, after I've presented the problems, Malin will tell you about how we can support users when they encounter these problems.
Okay, so let's have a look at our approach again. So what we've done so far is we scraped the reviews from the Play Store, we did the topic modeling, and then extracted problems from these topics. And what we did in our second step to analyze the second research question was we derived scenarios from each of these problems, which we then used in an online survey. And we asked users, how often have you encountered a similar situation? How did you cope with this situation? And how could the app support you in this situation? For the sake of time, I'm only going to present some results on the third question, which was an open question and manually analyzed. Can you hear me okay? Is the microphone? It's off, okay. It says on. Hello? Can you tap it? Sorry about that. Or is it fine if I speak louder? Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay, and then in the end we...
Actually, hold on, because if we're recording the talk,
okay.
The recording section for you.
Okay.
Why are you trying to...
Okay. So, shall I continue or not? Yeah? Okay. All right, we'll only talk about... Okay, that's fine. Cool, thanks. So we'll only talk about the third question, which gives us system support strategies for the problems that we found. So For the online survey, we had then 27 scenarios in total. And in order to keep the survey short, we decided to randomly assign 10 scenarios per participant, and we had 286 valid answers in the end. So what kind of support do users want for which problems? And again, there's a huge list in the paper, and you can read all about that if you're interested. And we're going to highlight only 4 of them, and again give illustrative examples for what users actually said or participants said in our study. So for problems with the knowledge base, when users got suggested an item by the system but did feel like they did not get enough information about this item to make an informed decision whether to accept it or not, they would like to have more information on the item itself. So again, we're going to use the Netflix examples where participants said, I would like to read a short paragraph about the actual character story, preferably with links to reviews or IMDb. Or another one stated, Netflix should always give a description of series films. This would be more important than the trailer. For problems with the algorithm or the algorithmic processing, people would like to have defaults and alternatives. So for the for Facebook, sorry, people said, I just want a news feed in which all my friends and subscriptions appear in chronological order. Or the system should actively show contrary suggestions and not only suggestions that are coherent with my own opinion. For problems with user choice, which is probably kind of intuitive but still important, going back to the maps example, users want to be asked for permission before the system changes anything. And here I brought the quotes again. So one participant said, okay, the system should at least give an option for don't change my selection. And problems with user feedback, which was interesting, was that people would appreciate to include other users' views. So going back to Netflix rating system, people did not, or they did not rely on the matching scores that Netflix shows, but would rather have human opinions. So one participant said, Netflix should suggest films that match my films only by 50%, but have been high rated by other users. And another one stated, the system should show me more shows that all people like, not only those that I will probably like. So yeah, this was just a very brief glimpse into the results, and as I said, more can be found in the paper if you're interested. And let me now summarize the insights from both the review analysis and the survey. And we see those this summary as recommendations for practitioners or system designers, as well as yeah, for researchers to point out future research avenues. So the first one is, let users stay in control and provide fine-grained control options. So what reoccurred across all applications were control issues and the wish for more fine-grained control options. So users appreciate suggestions but want to make the final decision themselves. And I think this conveniently matches the vision that most of us have for interaction with intelligent systems. So the system as the decision aid, but the user as decision maker. And interestingly, our data also indicated that people, in most cases, people do not want to know why or how a suggestion was made, but rather have the system presenting an item in a way, look, this is my suggestion, and this is all the information that I have about this item, and then let the user himself or herself decide why or if the suggestion makes sense. So the next point is to explain interactively. So we found an overall need for explanation, although it was not as prevalent as the desire for more control. Our results point to a need for more interactive explanation instead of static ones. So our participants wanted to try out things and observe the results in the algorithmic output. For example, people suggested to include different modes for the Facebook newsfeed, what we have also seen from the quotes, so namely a chronological order or an algorithmically curated. Then what we called allow users to turn intelligence on and off. We mean by that that we found that a large number of participants worked around the actual intelligent component of the system. So they used Google Maps just really as a map without the routing suggestions. They ignored the Facebook feed and instead went to their friends' pages directly. Or they browsed Netflix just as a normal database without taking into account the suggestions. And we see a potential for design here because if we give users the option to use the system in both ways, then we might enhance user experience because we had the impression that people will try and do it anyway if we don't. And the last point is to honor expressive user feedback and corrections. And I think user feedback and corrections, we all agree, or this is has been recognized as an important part of interaction with such systems. But in practice, we found that these options were difficult to find for users or sparse or not seen as very helpful. And for example, Netflix offers only a binary approach with this thumbs up and thumbs down, which was seen as by many users as not helpful. And moreover, what is seemingly obvious but important is to actually take the feedback into account. I mean, we have seen that from the keynote that this is probably happening, but this is a crucial point that we want to stress. So we come to the end of our talk. This is an overview of what we've done, and we are looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
All right, so we should have time for a couple questions here.
So thank you for this really amazing talk. I think you, with the radical idea of actually figuring out what people like and dislike about an app, you have actually almost disproven some of the assumptions that people in the IUI community or the adaptive systems community sometimes take for granted, right? Like people want personalized things. You show sometimes they actually want to see what everyone likes, or they want to see contrary things, which I think is really, really useful. Now I believe you're one of the nominations for Best Paper Award, and I think that will likely come with an invitation to submit to the TAAS journal. So my suggestion is, in that journal paper, can you codify this approach? Because your approach is really powerful, is really methodical, and I think everyone here can benefit from that approach. So it's not really a question, but a comment. I think you should codify this.
Yes,
yeah.
We will do that in case we get an invitation.
Hi, so I'm an interaction designer by training, and there's a pretty long history of people expressing a desire or research pointing towards a desire for more fine-grained customization or control, and then nobody ever using that. So there's a contradiction inherent in the desire for more fine-grained control, and you end up in a paradox of choice situation. With that in mind, can you suggest some future directions that you're looking at in your work?
So I think I would say, yeah, it kind of contradicts it, but what we are reporting on, first of all, is a feeling of control. We don't say that users actually are going to use all of it, but we think that the users need the feeling of control. And we think we have some very simple approaches that we identified. So for example, some of the users are already trying to kind of influence the Facebook algorithm, for example, by directly going to their friends' pages and thinking, okay, when I'm doing this, I will get more of their posts in my newsfeed. And I think there are some simple things that you could just try out in the future and actually see whether users would use it or not. But of course, we are also aware that some of these strategies are kind of contradictory to the company's goals behind it. So we see that this is kind of difficult, but from our impression, this is what the user wants.
And we have time for one probably really quick question.
Hi, really good talk. I really like the approach. I was curious of your thoughts on this notion of tolerance to failure, right, and the cost of failure. and what that means for a need for explanation. Because I think you made a point that people were not necessarily interested in knowing why it was doing what it was doing. But I wondered if you controlled for the notion of cost of failure. Like, what is the failure cost of a bad recommendation on a movie versus the cost of failure on a more mission-critical task? So I wonder if you had any thoughts on that and how people's needs of explanation may change based on that.
Yeah, so we did not specifically look into that, but that's a good comment, thank you. So what we found, or what is interesting, or just a brief comment on that, that with Netflix, people do really get emotional. If it's not working and people choose a film that does not match their interests, they are really freaking out. So I think I mean, we have looked at low-risk applications, but even then, I guess there are differences in costs of failure, and I absolutely agree that that's important to look into.
Thank you. Let's thank our speakers again. And the next paper